We all have heroes. People we look up to. People we want to be like. People we want to be. However, most of the time, if we are honest with ourselves, we have very little in common with our heroes. But what if there were people like us in the Bible? People who made mistakes, messed up, didn't always get it right, but really wanted to. What if they were people just like me?
Well, good morning. We continue to lift up our team that's in Mexico and pray for them as they're doing the same thing this morning that we're doing. Praise God for that, right? So I want to remind you before we get going this morning. Next week there will not be a Saturday night service next week. This service will not happen next week. We will have one combined service Sunday at 10 o'clock. All right. And so we want to make sure that if you look around and you see somebody that's normally here, it's not here, would you help us make sure that they know that that's happening. It's our fall festival weekend. It's going to be it's always just a lot of fun, great time. And we have a meal afterwards. So please keep that in mind. We are going to finish our series that we started several weeks ago. This idea of like me. And we're going to talk about this fella today that, I would hope, it would be awesome, it would come to the end of my life or at any point in my life that this could be said about me. Now, I already told you, like Acts chapter 4, it's like, man, I really want that said about me. That would be cool. When Peter and John are in front of the leaders and preaching the gospel, it says they realized, right? They realized that these were just ordinary guys, or in my case, below ordinary guys, right? And then they said, we noticed something about them, that they were guys, they were men that had been with Jesus. Now, I don't know that anything better could be said about anybody, right? Because Jesus, when you've been with him, you don't walk away the same. You just don't. But, we're going to talk about David today, specifically the beginning of what we know about him, his life, and I love it because what comes to mind with David is this guy who carried this title, a man after God's own heart. And so we're going to look at that today. How did that happen? How did that happen? Is that something that David was just instantly born with? Is that something that just happened? And so we see this, but throughout the Bible, we read over and over that God is very concerned. I would say he's more concerned than anything else, and that would be about your heart. About your heart. We read in Deuteronomy 6, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart. The Proverbs 4 says, above all else, guard your heart. We read in Psalms 51, create in me a clean heart. Proverbs 5, right? Or 3. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And we read in Acts 13, chapter 22, we read this. After removing Saul, he made David their king. God testified concerning him, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. And so I want us to look at that today, just a bit of background, right? We know Saul. Saul was appointed king by God, and it says that Saul, he was bad and getting worse. And so God tells the prophet Samuel, we read in 1 Samuel chapter 16, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul? Okay, there was some emotional attachment to Saul, right? Saul was the king, right? There was, it was like, and it hadn't gone well, and it wasn't going to go. It was going to get uglier as it went on. Since I have rejected him as king over Israel, fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. Now there it is, Bethlehem, right? It's around, if you don't know it, it's around the corner, right? Christmas is here if you've been anywhere, right? It's already here. It used to be that Christmas was like in competition a little bit with Thanksgiving, but we've erased Thanksgiving altogether, right? Now it's in competition with what? Halloween, isn't it? I mean, you see Halloween stuff and Christmas stuff at the same time when you go to the store. It's crazy, but think about that for a minute. Bethlehem, right? Mary, Joseph went to Bethlehem because what? They were of the line of David. And in order for them to be counted in the census, they went to where their family was from. Okay, it all fits together so beautifully. But as we look at David today, as we really look about, God had called him in. Just listen a few verses down. When they arrived, Samuel saw that Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands before the Lord. Okay, so the prophet shows up. He meets. Jesse's got all his dudes lined up. In some translations, it does say all of Jesse's sons were there. And the NIV doesn't say that, but we know that that's not true, is it? Keep that in the back of your mind. But so it looked, right? It looked like, that this guy that was standing before the prophet, he looked like a king. I mean, he just did. What was said about Saul, right? Remember, Saul, I'm sure this guy was tall, right? And Saul was tall. He was head and shoulders above everybody else. What is it about being tall that going to get you an extra pass on everything? The rest of us short people, we all have to really dig in, right? And do all the work, right? Yeah, I'm not just talking about basketball either, right? What is it? I don't know. What is it? But listen to what God says. He says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. Boy, if we could only take that to heart, couldn't we? People look at the outer appearance, but the Lord looks at the what? The heart. Say it with me. The heart. The heart. And this is what was so key from the very beginning of David and what God had in mind. No matter what you have going on, no matter how it looks, God already knows your heart. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes that's a little startling to me, right? Because deep inside me sometimes, stuff that's going on, it's like, that's just between me and me, isn't it? Well, it's not. It's not. God is there. And so when God says this about somebody, boy, it really gets our attention, doesn't it? It says Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. Samuel said to them, the Lord has not chosen these. He asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? Yeah, there's still a younger one, Jesse answered. He is tending sheep. Samuel said, send for him, and we will not sit down until he arrives. All right, so everybody, we don't know how long this took, but everybody was going to remain standing, right? Yeah, talk about a long church service or a worship service where everybody stands the whole time, right? And so they go. So he sends for him. They sends a servant for him to go get him. And I want to just really first think about this for a second, because David, he was young. If he's a teen, I don't know that he's a teenager yet. If he is, he's barely one. Okay, and he's out there. He's in the fields doing what he's supposed to be doing, and a servant shows up and says, Dad wants you. Get home. And that's all he knows. He runs home. He goes home, right? And so I want to just pose the question just for a second. David had a heart like God, I think, before he was old enough to know what God really wanted. I really do. But his father didn't recognize it. No one else kind of did. And a lot of times, we wait on God's call to have a heart like God. But God calls us, and then I really think he develops the heart. I don't think David was born with any different heart than the rest of his brothers. I really don't. And I really think that this can be said about any of us. And so it says, verse 12, so he sent for him, he brought him in, and he was listen, out of all, all we've heard about not paying attention to outer appearances, look at what's recorded. He says, he was glowing with health. It's like, whoa, okay. In some translations, in some versions, it said he was ruddy. What's that mean, ruddy? Okay, well, it must be he's glowing with health. And was fine in appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil, anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and from that day on the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. And so, you get this scene. His brother, everybody's still standing, right? He walks in. Imagine, David doesn't know what's going on. He's not been privy to any of this. He walks in. He sees his brothers, in which he knows well, right? Good or bad. He walks in, and he sees a guy that he's never met. He's never met Samuel, but he knows. It would have been obvious. The prophet's in the house, right? And this guy walks up to him. And David would have known the process. This would have all, as soon as he saw the horn and he felt the oil first touch his head, he's going, what's happening here? Right? I mean, he would have looked around before that even happened and thought, there's a party happening here? Who ordered pizza and didn't invite me? It would have been one of those things. And not only that, he didn't get to take a shower before he came in. He still smelled like sheep, right? When he showed up, and this guy comes to him, pours the oil on his head, leans over and whispers in his ear and says, hey, dude, you're the next king. I mean, can you imagine? Right? There would have been nobody more surprised, right, than David, although everybody was. Everybody, even his dad. His dad did not even think that it was an option. I mean, think about it. He would have known that David, was one of his sons, right? But he didn't think whether it was age, we don't know. Probably it was. So I just, keep that in mind. Whether you're young or you feel like you're old, and the older I get, I'm not old. You know, amen? Okay, all right. Well, someone's listening this morning, right? Right? And so, God, that doesn't matter to God, does it? It doesn't. He's concerned about what? Our heart. So how does this happen? How did this work with, I believe it was a process for David. I really was. And I believe it started, number one, in solitude. I really did. Something that our culture, is becoming to know very little of, right? Yeah, we have taken this idea and turned it into something ugly. I'm alone. Oh, really? Are you really alone? Because the God I know, says He's always with me, right? And if God's always with me, then this idea of solitude is an opportunity to what? To connect with God in some crazy way. And I believe that David, he knew this, right? He stood out there with the sheep many times alone. He left his phone at home. You ever done that? Left your phone at home and you're too far down the road to go back and get it? What do? we go back and get it anyway, don't we? Like, I need that thing, don't I? I need it, right? Somebody's going to try to get hold of me here or whatever. I gotta check the stuff, whatever it is. We find ourselves struggling with this, and I think David knew it well. It's why he wrote most of the Psalms, I think. He would write this: the heavens reveal the glory of God, right? As he looked up at the skies. Anybody get out there and see any of the northern lights? Yeah? I couldn't see them with my naked eye, but boy, my cell phone, there's something crazy in that, right? You can take a picture of that thing, you're like, whoa, look what that's supposed to look like, right? But it looks good anyway, doesn't it? The first round of that, I could see glimpses of it, and people were like, I think you're looking too hard. Well, I said, just keep squinting, okay, right? Because God's doing something that he wants to reveal to us. And that's crazy to live in Indiana and be able to see something like that, isn't it? But when we do, we realize, wow, look what God has done. And I think the awe of who God is, well, it was something that David took in every day. And you can too. I love what David writes this. He wrote this book a long time ago now called Death by Suburbs. And he writes, he says, it's as simple as getting up early in the morning or buying a good pair of earplugs, creating space that's necessary for setting lines so you can see God. It's like setting up a line item for Christmas. If you don't put it in your budget, then January is going to be pretty tough. And with all that life has for us, quietness is hard to find. We don't find it in carpooling. We don't find it in working on our next degree or the partnership for the firm or even the birthday party we have coming up for one of our children. You wake up one morning and you find that your 3-year-old is now 3 and he can pump his legs and get on the swing without you. And you think, what just happened? Did I miss that? Then he says this. He says, this all happens when we're not paying attention. Perhaps many dreams have been fulfilled, but our soul still becomes empty. It's like a boarded up discount store in an empty parking lot with lots of weeds growing up through the cracks. Can you relate? I can. I've been there. Solitude brings us a new reality of our life in a way that, well, nothing else can. Secondly, David's heart was shaped by faithfulness. It really was. This is something that's lost on us as well. As a shepherd, it would have been mind-numbing to take the sheep from one pasture to the next and just make sure they had grass and water, right? There's a reason why sheep don't show up in circus acts. You ever notice that? I mean, you get a donkey to do some stuff, I love the Nate Bargatze thing where he says he went to a deal where a donkey jumped off a high dive. It's like, I would sign up for that, right? Let's check that out. But you don't get sheep to do anything smart. Who the Bible calls sheep? It's you and it's me. It's you and me. It's like, and it's not meaning it in a great way. You think about it. This would have been something that would have been like, okay, this is pretty basic, but David did even the most basic things faithfully. What about you? What about you? You may have some really basic things in front of you, and you may think, man, I can't wait to get past this. And maybe God's saying, why? You're not going to get past it until you do it faithfully. I don't know. Thirdly, his heart was shaped by adversity. David did not always have it easy, right? Listen to this. This is when David shows up. This is 1 Samuel 17. He shows up to be at the front lines with his brothers. It says, but David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep, and when a lion and a bear came to carry off the sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because He has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistines. Saul said to David, go, go. The Lord is with you, right? Yeah, it wasn't easy. He was going to do something that really wasn't even really his job. But he saw his heart was already molded in a way that when he saw something that was totally wrong, instead of just turning his back on it and walking away, it's like, hey, can somebody answer for me? How come we're just not marching forward on these people? Aren't we in the army of the living God? And this is lost on some of the church today. We sit and we play defense. We're really supposed to be on offense. And we get them confused. We need to be storming the gates of hell. Right? Because it will not, it has no power over us. And I think fourthly, what really shaped David's heart was rejection. You ever felt that before? Ooh, there's something that really shapes us inside of rejection. Listen to a few verses before this. When Eliab, David's older brother, had heard him speaking to the men, he burned with anger and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? You can feel it, right? You can feel the tension. I know how conceited you and your wicked heart is. Whoa. You came down only to watch the battle. Not everybody's going to see your heart right. This is the guy that God said had a heart after himself. And what does his brother say? You have a wicked heart. I think David was not only ostracized by his surroundings but his own family himself. And if you've ever had that happen, it's pretty mind-boggling and miserable. Beth Moore says this: David's wisdom and meditative nature got its start in the loneliness of a little brother who was accustomed to being downed and ostracized. That'll shape your heart, won't it? But normally we allow this sort of thing to shape our hearts in all the wrong ways. Right? We allow it to harden our hearts. We allow it to control our thoughts. But David must move through it. Psalms 78 says this: He chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep's pen, from tending the sheep. He brought him to the shepherd of his people, Jacob, of Israel and his inheritance. David shepherded them with integrity of heart, and with skillful hands he led them. Right? So if this is possible, and I think it is, and the list could go on about the things that happen to shape our hearts. You have your own thing that God is working on you to shape your heart after His. But there is nothing more powerful than what Jesus has done, right? So how does this work? If your heart is shaped, then things will, when God calls you to do something, you will be ready. And how does the call work? Well, it works like this. First of all, when God calls us, it may not feel or look spiritual at all. Now, when I say that, everything is spiritual, but sometimes when God calls us to do something, we think, that's not important. How could God use where I'm at right now as something spiritual? Well, that depends upon your heart. It really does. It really does. And you think about David. David, the contrast between between Samuel and David, just for a second. It was, when we think of Samuel, we think of a prophet. We automatically think spiritual things, don't we? He's the guy who's so close to God. He's in tune with God. He hears God's word, and then he presents God. He's God's mouthpiece to God's people, right? When we think of David, we kind of think of spiritual things, but David was not called into a real spiritual position. He was called in a political position. He was going to be king. Okay? And the two are in drastic contrast with one another, but you see, we don't see it that way because why? Because David's heart was right. And when your heart's right, no matter where you go to work to, it changes what you do. Well, secondly, the calling. It will come in God's timing. A lot of us feel like we're waiting on the next thing a lot of times. And you think about this, because David, after he was anointed, it was another 15 or 17 years before he took the seat of being the king, right? Think about that. God had something going on in the timing there, and it wouldn't have made sense to me, I'm sure everybody else, but I looked up the stats. You know what the stats are on a baseball player making it big, coming out of the minor leagues and making it to the major leagues? I know, I get it. The baseball's over now, right? But it's 5%. If you're going to play baseball, you're going to spend some time in the minor leagues. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And some people spend more time there than others. David spent his time well. Imagine David spending time in the minor leagues and he gets the call and he's ready. What about you? We don't know the timing. God will call us to do something. We just need to be in tune. And if our heart's right, we'll hear it. Thirdly, the call really never comes to the people who we already consider significant or glamorous. It comes to, just like Samuel. just like Samuel. He, over and over. It's like, God, is this the guy? This guy looks like the next king. God says, no. It's not what he looks like. It's not what he looks like at all. It's what's happening in his heart, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 1 says, brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things of this world, and the things that are not are, and to nullify the things that are, so that no one can boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God, that is, our righteousness, holiness, and redemption, right? So, nothing is as it seems. If we think about this correctly, whatever you get up and do in the morning, Monday's coming, right? Whatever that looks like for you, it can be a calling from God if our hearts are right? And it's not easy, like I said before. David, we're pretty sure David wrote the 57th Psalm while he was in the cave hiding from Saul. So we need to think about this for a second, because most organizations, most businesses that want to survive have some kind of thought for succession, right? Think about it, right? Like the CEO is going to rotate out, it's going to retire, and when they know that's going to happen, what do? Well, they begin looking for a new CEO, don't they? They begin looking for a new leader. When they find him, normally they'll take the guy coming in and the guy going out, they'll put them together a little bit. Why don't you guys work together for a year, right? And get to know what's happening and all that sort of thing. And there's a great exchange of leadership, right? All David had here, think about this. If that would have happened, right? Because David had to run and hide from the existing king, because if they would have let's hang out a little bit together, the king would have killed him. Think about it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something that would have been anybody would have thought of. Most of the time, all these things happen progressively, not instantaneously. I don't know about you. I love Paul's conversion story because it's pretty instantaneous, isn't it? The guy saw the light, didn't he? He saw the light. He was on the road. He was blinded. And then he followed. For David, God spent intentional time developing his heart all along. It was progressive. He can do the same for you and me. And when we think about it, and understanding God's call upon you and me in developing our hearts. I think of all the people who God has called that I could think of. There's many more that I could think of that God has called really into vocational ministry from this church. I think about it. Like I think of people like Dennis Houchel. I think of people like, a few weeks ago we had missionaries here who this is their home church, Kevin and Susan Fry. A few weeks before that, we had missionaries that are from this church, Mark and Helen Begley. We have ministers that are actively leading rather large churches. Andy Huddleston, Jeff Huddleston. We have many others who have answered the call to vocational ministry that still are in the building right now. You know why they're not in this room? Because they're doing ministry. But what if I were to tell you, even more importantly than that when you get up, you put the key in the ignition or you push the button to start your car. And wherever you go is where God has you on purpose. You see, it changes all that we do when we realize that God is cultivating our hearts to be just like His. So I'm going to ask the band to make their way up. And as they do, I want to leave you with this verse. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 16. It says, "For the eyes of the Lord range through the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him." What's a fully committed heart look like? Well, we just saw it, right? We just walked through it. Wherever you're at in that process is the right place for you. And it all starts very simply with giving your heart to Christ. It's really that simple. And maybe you need to do that for the first time today. Maybe we just need to pray about where you're at. You're in the stage of adversity, and you're like, man, I'm having trouble seeing what God's doing. Maybe we just need to pray together. I don't know. But we're going to stand and we're going to sing this great song together. Let's do it with all of our hearts.